For decades, the standard protocol at Skinwalker Ranch was to look up. Millions of viewers, independent researchers, and government investigators fixated on the desert sky, tracking high-velocity orbs, transient radar signatures, and bizarre atmospheric distortions. The assumption was simple and comforting. Whatever governed this 512-acre stretch of Utah land was visiting from somewhere far across the cosmos. But buried deep within the confidential logs of the scientific team was a growing, terrifying counter-hypothesis, suggesting that the aerial phenomena were merely secondary emissions, venting from a massive artificial infrastructure hidden directly beneath the desert floor. The legends of the Uinta Basin had warned of subterranean voids for centuries. Native Ute tradition spoke of forbidden underground passages beneath the mesa, passages that sealed away ancient, non-human entities and strange energies that were never meant to mingle with the surface world. While modern science traditionally dismissed tribal folklore as allegorical myth, high-density seismic imaging and ground-penetrating radar sweeps conducted across the ranch began returning structural signatures that made those ancient stories impossible to ignore. Embedded deep within the bedrock extending beneath the eastern ridge directly toward the infamous Triangle Sector sat a continuous, linear void that defied every known principle of natural geology. The breakthrough came during a targeted excavation along the collapsed debris field at the base of the mesa. Heavy machinery clearing tons of fractured sandstone struck a layer of subterranean rock that refused to crumble under standard hydraulic pressure. When the crew brought in a heavy diamond-tipped rotary bit to penetrate the obstruction, the drill string dropped suddenly into an empty void 4 feet down. Flushing the shaft with optical cable cameras, the monitoring screens inside the command trailer lit up with an image that halted the entire operation. A perfectly horizontal, engineered subterranean shaft 8 feet in diameter stretching into absolute darkness. This was no abandoned 19th-century mining adit or natural limestone solution cave. The walls of the hidden shaft were flawlessly smooth, fused into a dark vitrified sheen resembling polished obsidian. There were no drill marks, no blast fracturing, and no structural collapse along its entire visible length. Air quality sensors lowered into the breach recorded an immediate atmospheric anomaly. The air inside the shaft was completely sterile, stripped of ambient humidity, biological microbes, and organic dust, maintaining an unnatural, static temperature of -10 degrees Celsius, despite the sweltering desert heat on the surface. As principal investigator Eric Bard and astrophysicist Dr. Travis Taylor calibrated their baseline diagnostic instruments over the open entry, the physical environment surrounding the shaft reacted violently. The baseline magnetometers deployed around the excavation site pegged their scales, registering a localized magnetic surge exceeding 2 full Teslas. Simultaneously, every spectrum analyzer locked onto the infamous 1.6 GHz radio frequency, not with static noise but with a pristine, high-amplitude digital carrier wave broadcasting directly out of the dark opening. The scientists hadn't simply stumbled upon an ancient archaeological ruin or a geological curiosity. They had breached a sealed, pressurized conduit, a subterranean artery connected to an active power network running deep beneath the basin. Standing at the threshold of the dark, frozen shaft, listening to the faint, low-frequency hum vibrating through the solid stone, the team realized that decades of looking to the sky had been a distraction. The core secret of Skinwalker Ranch was waiting directly beneath their boots, and for the first time in human history, the door was wide open. With the 1.6 GHz digital carrier wave pulsing steadily out of the open breach, the scientific team assembled a specialized surface investigation team. Safety protocols were elevated to maximum isolation standards, equipped with self-contained atmospheric rebreathers, high-output ultraviolet floodlights, and heavy armored fiber optic tethers to maintain direct communication through the dense electromagnetic field. 2 researchers prepared to descend into the frozen shaft. The moment the boots of the lead investigator touched the smooth, vitrified floor of the tunnel, the physical sensation was instantaneous and unnatural. The dark obsidian-like veneer lining the shaft was completely free of dust, condensation, or geological decay. Under the harsh focus of the ultraviolet floodlights, the material did not scatter light normally. Instead, it produced a faint, iridescent refraction, bending light rays along the curved contours of the walls in organized geometric bands. Moving forward step by step, the team unspooled their reinforced fiber optic line, streaming crisp, ultra-high-definition video directly back to the surface command trailer. At 40 yards from the entry portal, the round tunnel abruptly opened into a precise octagonal corridor 12 feet wide and 10 feet high. The transitions between the stone faces were impossibly sharp, exhibiting 90-degree angles cut with microscopic accuracy through solid, unbroken bedrock. There was zero rubble, no fallen shale, and no evidence of mechanical cutting tools. The corridor appeared to have been carved by an ultra-high-energy thermal beam that had instantly vaporized the stone and vitrified the surrounding wall matrix into a permanent, non-porous glass sheath. Inside the command trailer, Dr. Travis Taylor noticed a sudden, alarming shift in the real-time environmental telemetry coming from the researchers' suits. The localized barometric pressure inside the octagonal corridor was rising rapidly with every step the team took deeper into the Earth. Within a span of 30 feet, the atmospheric pressure jumped from local surface baseline up to 3 full atmospheres. Yet, the air was not flowing back out of the open portal behind them. An invisible, localized pressure gradient was holding the heavy air tightly trapped inside the shaft. Simultaneously, the handheld Gauss meters carried by the entry team registered a rhythmic, sweeping magnetic field that passed through their bodies every 4 seconds. Accompanied by each magnetic wave was a deep, subaudible thrumming sound, an infrasonic vibration pulsing at an exact baseline of 8.1 Hz. This frequency matched Earth's natural ionospheric Schumann resonance, proving that the underground network was physically phase-locked to the electromagnetic field of the entire planet. Then, as the team reached 80 yards into the subterranean corridor, their ultraviolet light struck a shimmering, physical obstruction blocking the passage ahead. Suspended across the entire span of the octagonal hallway was a dense, luminescent veil of pale cyan light. It hummed with a soft electrostatic crackle, casting a cold artificial glow back down the dark glass walls. Thermal imaging cameras trained on the barrier recorded a terrifying temperature differential. On the researchers' side of the veil, the air remained a freezing -10 degrees Celsius. But directly through the translucent cyan light, thermal sensors registered a searing 60 degrees Celsius. The shimmering veil was acting as an active, localized force barrier, an environmental airlock separating two vastly different atmospheric states inside the same stone mountain. Extending an insulated carbon fiber measuring rod toward the glowing cyan curtain, the lead researcher watched as the tip of the rod crossed the boundary. The moment the material penetrated the field, the 1.6 GHz signal broadcasting through the tunnel network spiked in amplitude, shifting its simple carrier pulse into a complex, high-density stream of digital data packets. The hidden tunnel wasn't just a passive underground passage. Breaching the initial threshold had activated an automated security protocol, and the barrier ahead was preparing to scan whatever had dared to step inside its domain. As the carbon fiber measuring rod crossed the boundary of the pale cyan veil, the high-density digital data stream surging across the 1.6 GHz band stabilized into a clean, repeating telemetry loop. In the surface command trailer, Eric Bard watched the spectrum display transform into a dense cascade of binary code. The hidden underground complex was reading the composition of the intruding object in real time, measuring its molecular mass, thermal footprint, and electrical conductivity. Recognizing that the field was a passive diagnostic scanner rather than a destructive defensive barrier, the lead researcher took a deliberate step forward and passed through the shimmering curtain. The physical transition was immediate and disorienting. The heavy 3-atmosphere pressure choking his lungs vanished instantly, replaced by a sudden sensation of near-total weightlessness. The freezing -10-degree ambient chill surrendered to a dry, artificial heat of 60 degrees Celsius, while the heavy fiber optic tether trailing behind him began to drift upward, floating in a smooth, effortless curve. Beyond the cyan airlock, the narrow octagonal passage opened into a breathtaking subterranean void of colossal proportions. The entry team was standing on a narrow metallic catwalk jutting out over the edge of a massive, circular cathedral-like vault spanning over 500 feet in diameter. The ceiling soared far out of sight into the dark rock overhead, while the walls were lined from floor to ceiling with thousands of glowing, hexagonal tiles made from the same exotic titanium aluminum composite recovered during the mesa drilling operations. Suspended directly in the geometric center of this subterranean abyss, hovering without any visible physical tether, support column, or magnetic track, was a massive monolithic ring structure nearly 300 feet in diameter. The giant metallic ring was constructed from a seamless, matte black material that seemed to drink the ambient light out of the room. It spun on a smooth, perfectly balanced axis at a slow, continuous speed, creating a subtle gyroscopic hum that resonated through the researchers' boots. Suspended inside the open center of this rotating ring was a sphere of brilliant, blinding plasma, a miniature, self-contained star hovering in absolute vacuum, held in place by intense, localized gravitational fields. The entry team's handheld radiation detectors, designed to alert them to dangerous gamma or beta particle streams, remained entirely quiet. Instead, specialized field detectors registered enormous outputs of non-ionizing terahertz energy in localized gravitational waves. The spinning metallic ring was functioning as a planetary zero-point energy tap, drawing gigawatts of raw power directly from the Earth's deep core and converting it into a clean, localized gravitational gradient that stabilized the entire subterranean vault. Suddenly, the slow rotation of the 300-foot ring accelerated. The thousands of hexagonal composite tiles lining the 500-foot cavern wall illuminated in a swift cascading wave of pale ultraviolet light. A series of deep, sub-audible infrasound pulses swept through the air at 8.1 hertz, shaking the dust off the catwalk and sending ripple patterns across the floating optical tether. As the ring spooled up to speed, the central plasma core shifted from a brilliant white to a deep, intense blue. A tight, pencil-thin beam of coherent plasma shot out from the central star, striking a polished focal lens set into the far wall of the vault. Instantly, the fiber-optic video feed streaming to the surface command trailer flared with intense static as a localized spatial rift opened directly beneath the rotating ring, exposing a deep, swirling vortex of distorted space-time that revealed the true mind-bending scale of the facility hidden beneath Skinwalker Ranch. The opening of the spatial rift beneath the rotating ring sent shockwaves through every scientific sensor on the property. Inside the command trailer, primary monitors flickered violently as the video feed coming through the tethered optical line distorted into a surreal mosaic of bent light and visual noise. The space inside the 500-foot vault was warping. Light no longer traveled in straight lines. When the researchers on the catwalk pointed their high-intensity floodlights toward the swirling vortex beneath the ring, the light beams curved downward, tracing the gravitational contour of the rift like water flowing into a drain. The air within the vault grew impossibly clear, stripped of refractive index as the localized gravitational field compressed the surrounding space. Through the distorted aperture of the spatial rift, the team wasn't looking at rock, dirt, or subterranean strata. They were looking down into a vast, illuminated underground nexus extending far beyond the geographic boundaries of Skinwalker Ranch. Branching out from the central vault were 6 massive subterranean transit conduits, glowing arterial tunnels lined with the same composite tile matrix, vanishing into the deep crust toward the distant mountain ranges of the Uinta Basin. The facility beneath the ranch was not a static storage vault or a localized power station. It was an interregional subterranean hub, a central node in a planetary transit and power network buried miles deep beneath the North American continent. On the catwalk, the lead investigator felt a sudden rhythmic pull on his suit harness. The zero-gravity gradient inside the vault was shifting from static levitation into a directed directional pull, drawing everything on the platform toward the edge of the swirling vortex. Heavy steel carabiners dangling from the researchers' tactical vests drifted toward the rift, aligning like compass needles, pointing directly into the blue plasma beam. In the surface trailer, Dr. Travis Taylor monitored a catastrophic surge in the regional electromagnetic baseline. The power draw pulled by the spinning ring was causing inductive interference across 30 miles of local utility lines. Power stations in the surrounding valley reported sudden, unexplainable voltage drops, while military-grade satellite telemetry passing over the coordinates logged a localized gravitational anomaly equivalent to a sudden shift in Earth's density profile. Realizing that the spatial rift was expanding toward the edges of the containment vault, Dr. Taylor issued an immediate, uncompromising evacuation order. The entry team had to sever their research equipment, turn back past the cyan airlock, and ascend the shaft before the gravitational gradient overwhelmed the structural integrity of the catwalk. Reluctantly, the researchers braced themselves against the railing, unhooking their secondary sensor pods and leaving them anchored to the metallic deck to record automated metrics. Using the tension of the heavy fiber-optic tether, they pulled themselves backward across the frictionless catwalk, fighting the relentless gravitational pull of the swirling vortex behind them. As the lead researcher crossed back through the shimmering cyan plasma veil, he turned to take one final look at the central chamber. The spinning 300-foot ring had accelerated into a blur of black metal, the central star glowing with intense, eye-searing brilliance. The blue plasma beam was no longer just firing into the far wall lens. It was pulsing in rapid, structured sequences, echoing the exact binary rhythm of the 1.6 gigahertz signal that had baffled scientists on the surface for decades. The transmission was finally complete. The vault had initialized its core, established its spatial pathway, and opened the door to a hidden network that had waited in silence for millions of years. The moment the entry team pulled themselves through the cyan plasma veil, the atmospheric transition slammed into them with brutal force. The 3-atmosphere pressure and freezing -10-degree air rushed back into their rebreathers, while the weightless drag vanished instantly, dropping the researchers onto the vitrified glass floor of the octagonal corridor with a heavy, metallic thud. Behind them, the cyan curtain didn't simply remain a passive barrier. It underwent a rapid structural shift. The pale blue glow collapsed into a solid, opaque sheet of white-hot plasma that fused the edges of the octagonal passage shut. The heat generated at the seam was so severe that the vitrified stone walls glowed cherry red for several feet around the perimeter, permanently sealing the 500-foot vault and its swirling spatial rift behind a wall of impenetrable, superheated energy. In the surface command trailer, Eric Bard watched as the fiber optic video link cut to absolute static. The sensor pods left behind on the catwalk transmitted one final, staggering burst of telemetry before the connection was severed. The central star inside the rotating ring had reached total harmonic equilibrium, stabilizing the gravitational vortex and locking the 6 subterranean conduits into a permanent, low-power standby state. The massive energy surge that had threatened the local electrical grid miles away dropped back to baseline within milliseconds. Scrambling back up the dark 600-foot shaft, the two researchers emerged into the cool desert air of the Uinta Basin, exhausted, trembling, and bearing physical proof of a hidden world. Surrounding the entry shaft, Dr. Travis Taylor and the scientific crew stood in absolute silence as the surface magnetometers settled back into normal terrestrial metrics. The 1.6 GHz radio signal, which had broadcast with violent intensity throughout the breach, faded into a faint, rhythmic baseline pulse, a passive heartbeat confirming that the subterranean network below was fully operational and awaiting its next command sequence. The discoveries made within that hidden tunnel have forever shattered the traditional narrative of Skinwalker Ranch. The phenomenon was never an elusive, fleeting ghost haunting the night sky, nor was it a random collection of disconnected paranormal anomalies. The ranch is the surface anchor for an ancient, hyper-advanced subterranean hub, a planetary zero-point energy matrix and inter-regional transit network engineered from exotic metamaterials and buried miles deep beneath the Earth. As the scientific team cataloged the terabytes of data retrieved from the brief expedition, one chilling reality became undeniably clear. Humanity did not discover the complex beneath Skinwalker Ranch. By drilling into the mesa, breaching the vitrified shaft, and crossing the plasma threshold, the researchers completed an automated diagnostic sequence that had sat dormant for millennia. The machine inside the Earth has woken up, mapped the technological footprint of modern civilization, and unlocked its spatial pathways, leaving the doors to an ancient, world-altering network wide open beneath our feet. The resealing of the subterranean vault left the research team standing on the surface in a profound, unsettling stillness. Although the surface magnetometers had drifted back toward baseline and the violet sky glow had dissolved into the desert night, the data logged during those brief minutes inside the octagonal corridor permanently altered the trajectory of the investigation at Skinwalker Ranch. Inside the command trailer, Dr. Travis Taylor, Eric Bard, and the data analysis team systematically cross-referenced the telemetry retrieved by the automated sensor pods before the fiber optic line was severed. The numbers revealed a staggering reality. The spinning 300-foot ring and its central plasma core were not merely generating a localized spatial rift. The terahertz radiation signatures and gravitational wave harmonics matched the precise mathematical models for a functional Alcubierre metric, a localized warp bubble capable of compressing space-time in front of an object while expanding it behind. The 6 subterranean transit conduits radiating out from the central vault weren't standard physical tunnels carved through rock. They were stabilized spatial corridors engineered to bypass standard planetary geography entirely. Using high-resolution seismic array data collected over the preceding months, the team mapped the trajectory of those 6 subterranean conduits. The results were mind-bending. The primary conduit extending west-southwest lined up precisely with the volcanic roots of the Great Basin, pointing directly toward the deep crustal roots beneath Mount Shasta in California. The second conduit tracked northeast, aligning with the ancient mid-continent rift system stretching toward Lake Superior. Each conduit terminated at a major geological anomaly or ancient tectonic seam across the North American continent. The facility beneath Skinwalker Ranch wasn't just a localized research site or an isolated extraterrestrial outpost. It was the central switching hub of a continental energy and spatial transport grid, buried deep within the Earth's crust. As dawn broke over the Uinta Basin, casting long red shadows across the mesa, the scientific team deployed a ring of low-frequency infrasound sensors around the sealed tunnel portal. Even with the white-hot plasma wall blocking physical entry into the octagonal corridor, the subterranean hub was far from dormant. The infrasound arrays picked up a continuous, subterranean rhythm, a steady 8.1 Hz pulse echoing deep through the bedrock every 4 seconds. The machine beneath the ranch was idling. It had completed its automated diagnostic scan, cataloged the technological level of the human entry team, and locked its primary conduits into a low-power standby mode, waiting for a specific signal or a higher-level activation key to reopen the spatial pathways. Standing at the edge of the excavation site, looking out over the silent expanse of the triangle, Dr. Taylor and his team understood the staggering weight of what lay beneath their boots. The long-standing mystery of Skinwalker Ranch had been solved, but it had opened a doorway into an infinitely larger, more terrifying truth. The skies above the basin were never the origin of the phenomenon. They were merely the chimney. The true power governing this land had been here all along, entrenched in the deep structure of the planet, quietly maintaining an ancient infrastructure that predates human civilization. The confirmation of a continental-scale spatial transport grid buried beneath Skinwalker Ranch forces a complete, radical rewrite of human history. For generations, we operated under the comfortable assumption that our species sat at the absolute peak of planetary intelligence, building highways across the dirt and laying fiber optic cables across the ocean floors. We looked out at the solar system with a sense of pioneer pride, believing that any truly advanced infrastructure would naturally manifest as colossal structures floating in orbit or towering cities built on the surface. The cold physical metrics retrieved from the depths of the mesa prove how narrow our scientific perspective has been. The 300-foot rotating ring, the self-contained zero-point plasma core, the stable Alcubierre metric, and the 6 subterranean transit conduits stretching across the continent are not the tools of visitors passing through. They are the permanent hardened backbone of an ancient terrestrial architecture, a planetary network engineered from exotic metamaterials, embedded directly into the Earth's deepest tectonic seams, and designed to endure across geological epochs. Skinwalker Ranch was never a random magnet for ghost stories, military testing, or isolated UFO sightings. It was designed as the primary surface access node, the command valve for an underground transport matrix that spans the entire continent. When the scientific team breached that vitrified shaft and crossed the threshold into the central vault, they didn't trigger a random paranormal event. They completed an automated diagnostic sequence that had sat waiting in the dark for millions of years. The Subterranean hub evaluated the human entry team, calibrated its telemetry to match our 1.6 GHz communication spectrum, and locked its primary conduits into a hypervigilant standby state. The machine is awake, it is drawing raw power from the Earth's deep core, and it is actively waiting for the next phase of interaction as Dr. Travis Taylor, Eric Bard, and their research crew analyzed the massive archive of spatial and gravitational data retrieved from the breach. The message emerging from the Utah desert is final and undeniable. The greatest revelation in human history was never orbiting among the stars. It was waiting quietly beneath our feet all along, built into the very foundation of the world we call home. If this incredible journey into the secret subterranean hub beneath Skinwalker Ranch expanded your mind, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel so you never miss a step as this groundbreaking investigation continues to unfold. Now we want to hear your thoughts. Do you think this underground grid was built by an ancient, hyper-advanced Earth civilization, or is it part of an extraterrestrial planetary defense system? Drop your theories in the comments below. Thank you for watching, and stay curious.